Welcome to the STARS program, seniors taking active roles in society. And now, here's your host, Anita Finley.
Whoa, what a great show. And I was one of the judges for the senior STARS that we just had. And as a coincidence, you may remember Dr. Sam Sugar, such a great name. He was on our show a few years ago, and he has something that's really important. It's all about guardianship, but I want to go back to the senior STARS. So when I saw you trying out for that, I had a smile on my face. I never knew you sang.
Another hidden talent. I've been singing for a long time, just not professionally and not in front of big crowds. But like so many people in that competition, the singing experience I've had has been in the context of services at a place of worship, which I've been doing forever. And I like karaoke and I like music, and it was a natural. It was a lot of fun.
So when you were a kid, you were very talented, and you sang and did all those things?
Talented is in the eyes of the beholder, but I love rock and roll. And now I love country music.
That's interesting. I went just recently as a press person. I went on this Flower Power cruise.
Oh, sure.
And you ought to go.
I went on the Malt Shop Memory Cruise. We were there last November.
Right. Then I didn't see you, but I was there.
Yeah, we're going again this November.
Yes.
Oh, that's the best of all time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And now, though, this Flower Power is even different, and they're putting on another one. It's called Romance and Roll.
Right. They have a whole this Star Vista company.
Yeah, Star Vista. It's all part of Time Life.
Yeah, they lease the entire ship. It's 24/7 music and camaraderie and food and fun. Oh, it's great.
Isn't it? Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I saw the ad for it at the Boomer Expo.
Yeah.
That's how I wound up on there.
Good. Yeah, well, they sold out.
Oh,
and they have they're like 70% now full out. But it was great, and I'm so glad. Well, I know more about you all the time.
Uh-huh.
So you loved being a singer, and you did appreciate the people who get there and do. It takes a lot to get up on stage. You see, you've been a performer. You've been a physician. By the way, he is.
Yeah, physicians are all performers. Let's not forget that.
But, and so you're very sure of yourself. But a lot of these people, like you were telling about one of them, that's very scary.
Yeah, it is scary. And it's a real tribute to the 80 or more people who tried out in the first place, and a real tribute to the 11 or 12 or so who made the final cut for the performance. I got a chance to meet with almost all of them and spend some time, and each one has a story about what they do and how they got to where they are. They're all over 65, some way over 65, and they all had this drive to do this, and you have to give them credit. And besides which, this was a blast. This was a lot of fun, and getting up there on the stage in front of my friends and families and hundreds and hundreds of people at the Parker Playhouse, that was a real thrill. My wife is still buzzing about it. Our friends are calling. How did you do? How did you do? Right. For the record, I did not win.
No, but I wanted to ask you something. Do you remember the men in the chorus from the?
Yeah. Where are they from again?
They're from
an ALF in Fort Lauderdale. Yeah.
Yes.
And let me tell you how impressed I was. I got a chance to talk to a couple of them. These are older folks. Some of them not totally healthy. Many of them not totally healthy. But on stage, they got dressed up in their little outfits. They read their music. They sang their songs. And each one of them, because I was backstage, every single one of them walked off that stage with a smile. They couldn't have been happier with their performance. And for me, it was very poignant because everybody on that stage, including those folks who are in ALFs, and by the way, one of the contestants who made the Final Five lives in a facility in an ALF. Marvelous angelic voice. But it showed me what seniors should be doing at the ends of their lives or towards the middle or whatever, as opposed to what happens to the seniors and their families that I deal with on a daily basis, who are trapped in unwanted, illegitimate, costly, damaging, and abusive guardianships throughout the state of Florida. And now our organization is all around the country. It's really, this is not a labor of love that I do with this guardianship stuff. I wish I'd never heard of it. But this needs to be done. There are so many places with so many stories. I get as many as 10 new calls a week on our hotline from our website, which is www.aapg.net. Calls on our 800 number, just telling me the same story over and over and over. It's always the same. And that story is that family dysfunction leads to a court process which destroys an elderly individual and their entire estate. Nobody wins. As is so commonly said, nobody wins but the lawyers.
Well, but I want to ask you a question about this. So if there were no guardians, what would there be?
Let's be clear. I do not believe that all guardianships are abusive. That's ridiculous. There are many guardianships that are very appropriate, very necessary, and they take place in courts that really do their job well with monitoring and supervision and care about not only what happens to the money, which is a big deal, but in those guardianships, the people under guard, they're called wards, are not isolated from their families intentionally. They aren't abused physically. They don't get put up in places like we just had a case last week where there are bed bugs all over the facility and nobody cares. There are guardianships that are necessary, but my concern and our concern as an organization is the abusive guardianships which comprise what I would call a sizable minority of the cases. It's a situation where the laws that were intended to protect vulnerable individuals are perverted. And they're perverted so that individuals in this racket, and when we talked the last time, I was very reluctant to use the word racket, but I'm not reluctant anymore. It is a racket. And a racket is defined by a situation where a threat is evident, someone proposes a solution, you pay money for the solution, but the solution never comes and in fact gets worse over time. That's a racket. And that's what happens here, and it's a terrible embarrassment for our country. It's an embarrassment for the judicial system, and it's just really sad for families who get destroyed.
Well, let's go back all the way for people who don't know what a guardianship is. What does it entail, and how does it happen?
A guardianship is the appointment of a substitute decision maker in cases where the court has determined that an individual is no longer capable of making their own decisions. Decisions like, where do I live? Who can I marry? What do I do with my money? Can I vote? Can I travel? Those kind of decisions. Basically, the essence of our lives as free Americans. In a court process, an evaluation is performed, and we have been extremely critical of that process. And 3 people, only one of whom has to be a physician, decide if this individual is what's called incapacitated. Now, if you study the word incapacitated, no one will define it for you because it can't be defined. It's a made-up word, and it's a statement that an individual is not a full human being. Because once you become incapacitated and a guardianship is put on you or you're sucked into it, you lose all your rights as an American citizen. You are dead in the law. I know the lawyers are going to argue about that, so go ahead and argue. But the truth is, once you lose your rights in America, you're in deep trouble because then a total stranger generally is in charge of every aspect of your life. Every aspect of your life. Like, can I go out for an ice cream cone today? Well, a ward has to get permission to get an ice cream cone. If there's this famous story, talk about wards and guardians, where a ward, an elderly person who had been deemed incapacitated, rightly or wrongly, needed a new pair of pajamas. An elderly woman, and this is a true story, she told her caretaker, who called the guardian, who called the lawyer, who went to the judge, called back to the guardian because the motion for pajamas was approved. The guardian then calls a personal shopper who goes to Kmart or wherever, buys a $29 pair of pajamas. The guardian has it delivered to the caretaker who puts it on the ward. The bill for that $29 pair of pajamas was $3,000 because everybody's clock is running. The things that you and I would do for our loved ones for free have been monetized. And there's an hourly rate for these guardians who are not certified. They don't need to have any particular qualifications or education. And many times their records are kind of overlooked. I'm aware of one case not far from here where the guardian is a convicted felon and she's still a guardian, even though she's been reported. It's a very disturbing situation. At any rate, not only is it ridiculously expensive on a daily basis because many of these wards require, whether they do or not, they get 24-hour-a-day nursing care at elevated rates. So the downstream stakeholders of this entire racket, which includes lawyers, guardians, maybe judges, real estate agents, used car salesmen, jewelry stores, resale shops, pharmaceuticals, ALFs, nursing homes, and hospitals, all make money. All of them, all the time, every day, whether the ward is worth a lot of money or not. People say, well, this isn't a problem if you're poor, but that's not true either. So many of our cases are with public guardianships. There are two types, public and private. And the public guardianships are just as abusive, but they make their money a different way. A public guardian, for example, God forbid a million times that either you or I became a public ward, we still are valuable because we have Social Security. We might have VA or other benefits. We have Medicare or Medicaid, and those are piggy banks. If you control someone's life, you can control what kind of treatment they get, who gives them the treatment, what drugs they take, what drugs they don't take, who you refer them to, where they get their durable medical equipment. And it's been said that there are kickbacks involved. Now, I would not want to say that unless I could prove it, and I can't prove it today. But, where there's smoke, there's fire. There is an enormous amount of money in this racket, trillions of dollars across the United States. And there are hotspots. There's an article today, in a wonderful series of articles in Forbes, of all places, Forbes, doesn't get any more realistic than that talks about the greatest hotspots for this. And you know what number one is? Take a wild guess.
Oh,
Florida.
Of course.
And it's particularly southeast Florida, but it's all throughout Florida. And the other states that you might imagine, because they're high retirement rate states, we have 19% senior citizens in this state right now. The ones that follow closely after that are states like California, Nevada, New Mexico, Colorado, and Texas. And those are hotbeds of guardianship abuse. To tie this together, a lot of people said to me when I was auditioning for Senior Stars, says, why are you doing this? What's in it for you? And I said, the only thing that's in it for me is my self-satisfaction and maybe entertaining a few people. The only thing in fact, there is nothing in this fight against guardianship for me or anyone else. Our cases are awful and they will never get better. But our hope is that the next guardianship won't be abusive, that there'll be one less guardianship, that people in guardianship will know, and their families in particular will know, there are other people that are in the same boat. And I'm pleased to tell you that there has been a lot of progress since our last talk. In the last 2 years, we've had two major pieces of legislation passed to reform guardianship, Senate Bill 5 and Senate Bill 232 this year, that makes guardianship abuse a felony. Our problem is that prosecutors across the state's attorneys refuse to turn in their brethren lawyers. They won't do it. And so we have that next challenge in front of us. I can tell you that we have made inroads as far up as the Supreme Court of the state of Florida. We have national inroads. And I can tell you that the president is now fully aware. President of the United States, Barack Hussein Obama, is fully aware of this problem, and it remains to be seen if he responds to it. So, yeah, we've worked hard. We've made some progress. And I did make the finals on Senior Stars.
Yeah, that's true. But I'm sitting here with my mouth open because Dr. Sam Sugar is certainly passionate about this, and he is to be commended. I would say that you probably do this because you're like Don Quixote. You want to right the rightable wrongs.
Well, it is. And I'll tell you, Kathleen Pasadomo, the state representative from Naples, has become a friend, and I wrote her an email recently, and she asked me, Sam, are you still tilting at windmills? And I told her that windmills make electricity.
Oh, that's a good one. Well, I'm a very busy person with everything that I do, but I at one point was going to be a guardian just because I wanted to be a part to help people. I didn't, and someone said, are you sure you want to do this? You have the time to do this? And I said, why, is there a lot of time involved? And you're shaking your head.
There should be.
Yeah, there should be, because I could be there assisting you because I understand what taking care of elders is all about. And I am really floored. And I have seen, you never know unless you're in the home with someone, how someone's mistreating someone, but I know the opportunities are there.
Well, let's put another spin on this, okay? I think if you mention the word elder abuse to everybody universally will say, oh, that's terrible. Oh, we're against it. All the political candidates would start making speeches about it. The truth of the matter is, at least in my opinion, that as we age, we become less important. It's like the Black Lives Matter movement. They have a legitimate gripe. And so do seniors, because senior lives matter too. And unfortunately, our society doesn't value that expertise, that education, that experience. And instead, we seem to have devolved into a system that says, you're not very important. Let's push you aside, throw you someplace where you won't be bothered. Let's warehouse you, and let's take advantage of you as much as possible. It's not just in guardianship. It's in our culture. Everybody wants to market a scam. You know how many scams there are in Florida. They're all directed at seniors. Florida has a particular set of problems. We're number one in human trafficking, which guardianship is a form of, in my opinion. We're number one in Medicare abuse, IRS abuse, Medicaid abuse, and Ponzi schemes. We're famous for the Ponzi schemes. But Florida's got a problem. One of the sayings is that Florida has become a sunny place for shady people.
I haven't heard that, but I'll tell you what my motto is. Once you're a somebody, you're never a nobody.
Oh, how I wish that were always true.
Right, and that's what, well, in all the places that I go and I try to deal with people, that's what our magazine does. We always try to find the very best that we can in people. And so you're doing it in a way, you're doing it where it's an organizational problem.
Well, it's a structural problem in the country that works around something called a court process. Let me tell your listeners, if they ever hear the word court process, run. Don't walk. Run away. My advice to people is to never, ever, ever considering hiring a lawyer to handle family dysfunction. Because the inevitable outcome is, and I'll say something else. I have a brother and a son who are attorneys, and they're honest, wonderful people. But sadly, there is a sizable minority of Florida's 102,000 lawyers in all 67 counties that are crooked, that are abusive, that are exploitative, and who have no qualms about taking other people's money when it doesn't need to be taken.
It's interesting that you talk about that because, as you know, I'm a pretty strong woman, and I had a wonderful mother and father who were divorced, but I had a brother, and my brother was not doing the right thing, but I was there. I was there when I caught him, what he was doing. I have a fabulous lawyer, an elder law attorney, Joe Karp. I don't know if you know him, but he's spectacular. So we went, and while my mother was still able to, sure, she was of sound mind and body, he went and sat her down with his sisters, her sisters, the three of them, and he did an let's see, a trust that was called you couldn't change. Irrevocable trust, which my brother never knew about. And of course, everything came after my mother passed and he couldn't get it. But see, so here I am, knowing what's going on, knowing he was wrong, but not everybody has that power.
Right.
And that's the key. So, I mean, I understand what you're saying. Yeah. The problem is this. We know there are a lot of elders who live alone. They don't have anybody. They don't have the daughter, the son, even if they're good.
Right.
And so what are they to do? Well, they have neighbors, but who do they go to?
Well,
and that's the problem.
Let me put a different spin on that.
Okay.
We have endless numbers of cases where neighbors, good, solid, honest neighbors, see a problem with an individual who's alone, whose kids may have moved up north or whatever, who's alone, and they call the number for the DCF hotline. And that's where all the trouble starts, because DCF is not trained to solve problems. DCF is trained to report crimes, and they do a lot. I have some issues with DCF, and the director and I have been in a conversation for 2 years now. Nonetheless, DCF initiates a lot of these abusive guardianships. Now, not all the time, not even the majority of the time, but there's enough of these instances where someone needs to stand up and say, hey, wait a minute, this isn't right. Let's take a look at this. And we're our group, which is composed of hundreds and hundreds of victims of this racket, doesn't want to change the entire world. It's not going to do that. But we're demanding, actually, that government take a good hard look at what it's doing. And in particularly here in Florida, the Supreme Court, because it all goes back to the Supreme Court and the bar, which runs the Supreme Court, and they run each other. I think it's their responsibility to respond to these complaints. I think it's their duty to answer these requests for action. And I have a little bit of confidence that that will happen. There has always been corruption in the world. There has always been poverty. There has always been sickness. There's always been mental issues going back hundreds and hundreds of years. In fact, the whole concept of guardianship is an ancient concept from the Greeks. It's something called parens patriae, where the state takes responsibility for those who can't take responsibility for themselves. It was more developed in English law, and since slavery was abolished in 1865, during which time probate court ruled in all the cases of interstate slave trade. Nobody knows that either. We have evolved a system that was designed to be such a bulletproof, ironclad system to protect, really shield elders from abuse. And sadly, those people, the minority of attorneys and the minority of guardians and maybe the minority of judges, don't see things that way. They see it as an opportunity to enrich themselves.
See, that's the fallacy. In there lies the fallacy. If everyone did this as a volunteer, then we'd be in good shape. And so why don't you become the czar of this whole organization? We'll make it a part of, like, the Department of Elder Affairs should have a side issue, and that's what it should be.
Well, that's exactly what we accomplished last year. People should know this. There is now something called in the Department of Elder Affairs, the Office of Private and Professional Guardianship, which we created through Senate Bill 232 last year.
That's great.
With Senator Nancy Dieter. They don't exist yet. They won't exist until November, and we are now in the process of helping them determine their rules and operating procedure. This is going to change the game, I hope. There's a fellow named Jason Nelson who was appointed from DOEA to be the head of that organization, and they are now accepting complaints, but they can't do anything about it yet. Right now, complaints still have to go to DCF, which, of course, we have a problem with. But starting in November, because of our efforts and the wonderful, I have to say her name, the tireless efforts of State Senator Nancy Dieter, who's retiring, this bill came into being, and it complements last year's bill, Senate Bill 5, both of which are law now. Senate Bill 5 makes elder abuse a felony, and Senate Bill 232, both passed. SB 5 passed 140 to nothing.
Oh, that's great.
To nothing.
Wow.
And you know how much money we spent on lobbying on that bill? Zero. We lobbied ourselves. Yeah. Senate Bill 232 didn't do quite as well. It was 138 to 2. So
That's
there is a
amazing.
popular
Yeah,
sentiment in
right.
the legislature. And for anybody who's listening, if you've ever tried to get a law passed, wow, is it hard. Wow, is it hard. But we did it. And we're going to get another one passed this year because what we're doing is playing catch up. The abuses go on and on and on, and we have to, like the little boy in the dike, we're plugging this hole and plugging that hole. But we've been moderately successful, and if we can work with this new Office of Private and Professional Guardianship in Tallahassee, I think we'll see a decrease in the number of abusive cases, and maybe the risk level for Florida will go down. But the legislature has spoken. Now it's up to the other branches of government, particularly the judiciary, who controls the state's attorneys, the attorney general, all of the state prosecutors, the Office of Special Prosecution. There is a huge infrastructure that nobody knows about that we've had to learn. And we're plugging away every day, and we will make a difference. We already have, but it's not nearly enough.
Do you have volunteers in your organization?
Anybody who wants to volunteer.
Is that what you...
It's an all-volunteer organization. Nobody gets paid anything.
No, but
we're all victims.
And so you go and in your process, you send them out to people to confirm that.
No,
there's
not
wrong?
yet. That's
your
the
goal
third
would be?
leg. Well, that's the third leg of our raison d'etre: educate, legislate, advocate. We've
great.
done a really good job of educating because there's newspaper and media and movies coming up every day now, because it's real. It's a real problem. We've legislated pretty well, although we're not done yet. Our next step is to put a cap on the fees of attorneys. We'll see how far that goes before the bar just...
I agree that's really necessary
well,
with this.
I hope so. And the third part is advocate. Now, we've been busy with the first two, and our organization is only 3 years old. So we are now shifting into advocating for individuals in particularly egregious and abusive guardianships. I'm involved now with 3.
Well, wait, I want to ask you something. So now, though, with dementia and with, it's even worse than it even was because now people just totally are out of it. Well, Dr. Sam Sugar, we've run out of time, but I have to tell you, having you on our show is just, wow, what a show. So how should someone get in touch with you? Can I give them your number?
Our number is 855-913-5337, toll-free, and that's extension 101. Our web address is www.aap, P as in Peter, G as in Gregory.net. And my email is on there, and we're always looking for people who want to help.
Thank you. Well, you're great, and I appreciate you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, it's great.